What's going on? You're in the Beat Sessions, your place for all things music. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Let's talk about Van Morrison and his record, Remembering Now. He released that on June 13th. This is the 47th studio album from the legendary blues and soul icon, and his follow-up to 2024's new arrangements and duets. And since the start of his solo career, with his 1967 debut, Blowin' Your Mind, Van Morrison has dropped a record about every 15 months on average. One of the most prolific artists in popular music ever. And I would say also one of the most distinguished. And to see him continue at this pace at almost 80 years of age is a marvel in and of itself. He is an artist in which I would say it has become impossible to measure the enormity of his influence across every corner of popular music. But I will say that Van Morrison has felt quite a bit of blowback in the latter years of his career, especially in the last five. And I think it, in a lot of ways, is a big part of why Remembering Now is being overhyped. It's a great record, but this viewpoint overlooks the quality and the consistency of his latter years, placing this new record on a pedestal where I think many of his other releases over the last 20 years, albums like 2005's Magic Time or 2012's Born to Sing, No Plan B, also belong. And the last few records of covers, new arrangements, and even the instrumental Beyond Words seem to almost kind of serve as a means of recovery after the fallout from 2021's latest record project, Volume 1, and 2022's What's It Gonna Take? What I'll say about those records is that my biggest criticism with them, like I would say many records released at that time, is their ephemeral nature. That those two records will never embody the timelessness of Van Morrison's best work because of their thematic focus. But I do applaud Van Morrison because in times of uncertainty, when fear takes hold and fear-mongering replaces individual equanimity and common sense, he was brave enough to speak his mind, which was a very daring task through that period. There's kind of this old school punk element with Van that I've always adored. And in hindsight, I think there's quite a bit of his criticism that is justified. But, you know, the general population seems to have the memory of goldfish. And so the only reason I even address this is that the criticisms that were levied towards those projects also kind of piggybacked on those cover projects. And a lot of people said that he recorded those projects to play it safe, to recover. And I don't think he did. I think the arrangements on those records demonstrate that Van still has the one thing that sets him apart from other artists. And that's an ability to create popular music within the framework of classic compositions and orchestration. There's very few artists that I think really can thrive in this approach to songwriting. And so I think Remembering Now continues to showcase this tremendous talent. But I think that what has people so excited more than anything are the album's themes. There's this great combination of his romantic side and that poetic charm. And it's all mixed with an alluring element of personal reflection throughout this record. It's majestic in its ability to distill his lived experience. And I think this record is an honest statement about where he's at in his career and in his life. The title is somewhat cryptic, Remembering Now, which I think is what makes it effective. But I would interpret that title applied to this record as it's a collection of songs influenced by everything he's done throughout his career and what that sounds like in this moment. And what's even more impressive is that, you know, there are very few musicians who reach this point in their career and still have the creative wherewithal and the energy to write material that preserves the overall artistic integrity of their catalog. I think that Van's voice is still boisterous when needed, but it's also soothing and comforting in the perfect moments on this record. There's songs like Once in a Lifetime Feelings and Stomping Ground that reflect on looking back at life with a sense of appreciation for where he's been. While, there's also songs that honor his influences, a track like If It Wasn't for Ray, the second song on the record, and just recognizing that remembering now is just as much about living and enjoying the present moment as it is about appreciating everything that brought him here to this point. And I think all of us can feel that appreciation for all the good and bad that brings us to the present now. The personnel for Van Morrison's album Remembering Now includes Richard Dunn on the Hammond organ. He's stellar on that instrument. Stuart McElroy on piano. You got Pete Hurley on bass and Colin Griffin on drums, amongst many other people working on this record. Additionally, you have Fiatra Trench providing string arrangements, and contributions were also made by lyricist Don Black and folk artist Seth Lakeman. The music on Remembering Now, I think, is what you'd expect from a solid Van Morrison project over the decades. There's a foundation of rock and roll that drives tracks that really are true to rhythm and blues and soul. And I think that these stylings themselves lend to the ubiquitous sounds of jazz and gospel throughout this record. And I also love the way that Van Morrison doesn't shy away from country music on this album and throughout his career. I think it's a play that's always worked well for him to the most part, and it just makes sense with all the other Americana elements that he continues to work with on his albums. I would say that my one criticism would be that it would be nice to have more tracks with that jubilant edge of his to help counter the long run time. Despite feeling classic in so many regards, this record, like, the overall energy seems to be missing that balance that I think made his early work so captivating. Van is a guy who has certainly taken advantage of the space afforded by modern music formats, and I certainly over the last few decades especially. And I think it'd just be nice to see him be more discerning with a track list and the way that it affects the run of an album. A song like Back to Writing Love Songs brings the kind of energy that I was wanting to have a little more on this record, but in a lot of ways it's kind of a forgettable moment. And then there's songs like Memories and Visions and When the Rains Came that really are quite enjoyable, but I think they cause the overall album to feel a bit cumbersome towards the end with their kind of slower, methodical pace. This is a 68-minute record. It kicks off with Down to Joy, which originally appeared in the soundtrack to the 2021 Kenneth Branagh film Belfast, which was subsequently nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song. It's a great track to kick this thing off. It opens with soft droning organ, with gentle soul, and a subtle staccato horn arrangement, and a bit of lead guitar that opens up on this one over mid-tempo rhythm and breezy rhythm guitar as well. A lot of energy, a lot of great instrumentation that's going on with this one. I love the exchange from guitar to horns through the verse. There's a pre-chorus that works with some nice harmonies, leading into a great little hook that builds the foundation of the chorus. The track is bright with a nice gospel element to it and a solid groove that feels just really like a warm summer breeze. Just very gentle, very relaxing. It's a great combination of soul and R&B. You get a bit of lead guitar that opens the bridge, leading into another vocal element driven by the harmonies that work into the song. And it's going to finish with the refrain of the song's title, which is kind of a common theme on this record with the titles and the hooks. Your second track is entitled If It Wasn't for Ray. You get this staccato electric lead that opens, followed by organ and some rhythm guitar as well. Van's vocals go to work immediately on this one, and I love that walking bass line. It's just a brilliant combination of jazz and rock and roll at play there with a foundation of soul and R&B. Like I said, it's what he does, and really a lovely celebration of Ray Charles, with Van acknowledging the massive impact that Ray has had on his own work and just on popular music in general. There's great percussive layers that open up as this song progresses. It's a track with a tight structure, but it also embodies this wonderful loose jam feel. And I think that that is the best part about it, that lovely dynamic that exists there. And I think that'll reveal itself more with every listen. Your third track is Haven't Lost My Sense of Wonder. It's a reference to his 1984 album, Sense of Wonder. And on the first release of that record, the original pressing had to be recalled when the W.B. Yeats estate refused to allow Morrison's musical version of the poem Crazy Jane on God. They didn't want that to be included because they believed that Yeats's poetry should be only set to classical music. So Morrison substituted If You Only Knew, and later on, perhaps due to his efforts, Yeats' poems would be put to rock and roll settings on a whole album there. And I think that that is what, I mean, just really embodies what Van Morrison is all about, and that kind of like punk rock attitude. You get a bit of fuzzy bass and piano that open with droning organ and mellow rhythm creating the foundation of this track. There's a simple acoustic guitar element working with Van's vocals that has a really fun effect on this track. And I love the way that this one slows things down after the first two tracks, kind of, really edging that pace a little bit. Lovely vocal harmonies that work through the track with the piano coming to life as well on this one. And then a bit of country and a nice overall Americana influence driving this track. I love when Van, again, ventures into this territory. It's got a nice jam that takes over at about the 2-minute and 30-second mark of the track, with the piano and organ playing nicely off each other. And it leads into a bridge that sets the momentum into this really just solid coda to close this thing out. I think the lyrics of this one are fantastic as well. Van reflecting on a life of artistry, but maybe even more on, again, that tumultuous last 5 or 6 years that really, I think, tested him personally as an artist, as a person, but I love the perseverance that we're witnessing here. Your fourth track is entitled Love, Lover, and Beloved. It opens with a beautiful swell of strings that combines this classic pop feel with a bit of country, along with some doo-wop that feels particularly strong in the rhythm part of this track. And I love the light shuffling feel of the guitar and the playfulness of the piano in this track. The strings really go to work in the chorus, embodying a bit of gospel, as well as this kind of like organ with the lapping effect, just kind of like waves crashing against the shore. Dig the subtle shift in melody for the second verse on this one. And then the track hits a bridge at around the 2-minute and 15-second mark that starts with Van's vocals, then shifts to this great horn arrangement with burst of organ and strings, and then returns to his vocals. The song is going to finish strong with the hook in the title and a big coda that's mostly instrumental, with Van getting a little playful with his vocals in front of this massive droning organ to close this thing out. Your fifth track is entitled Cutting Corners. It's going to open with driving acoustic rhythm and just simple rim shot percussion. Really like the minimalism to open this track up. There's a lovely fiddle that works in to take the lead on the track, and it really embodies this quintessential Americana folk feel that I enjoy. A little electric lead is going to work into the first verse, with the composition generating more momentum after this. The feel of country is really prominent on this track as it builds. There's great versatility in the song's mood, though. It's reflective, evoking feelings of loss and regret, but in a way that finds the writer looking to move forward with those lessons in mind. One of the greater love songs on this record, I think. There's this really mean saxophone solo about halfway through, with harmonies that work in big on the back half, and this song working into a big refrain of missing you and I always will. It's very sentimental, and I really like that beautiful hook at the end of this thing. Your sixth song is entitled Back to Writing Love Songs. Opens with this big tropical rock feel. Just think Jimmy Buffett. Breezy acoustic guitar, steely electric riff with light production, and this conga, world style percussion that drives as well. The track finds more momentum and texture at about the 30-second mark after opening, but is going to maintain this feel from start to finish, with this kind of like gentle swell in its vibrancy as it moves from start to finish. Gentle electric solo takes hold around the minute and 30 mark. You get this solid string arrangement that works in when the vocals return. It's pretty, but like honestly, it's, as I mentioned, it's not quite my favorite, and the hook feels a bit tired by the end of it. I think this is a song that maybe could have found its place on a B-side or a different record somewhere. Your seventh song is entitled The Only Love I Ever Need Is Yours. Delicate, arpeggiated riff and tender strings that wax and wane, open and carry the track, which is one of my favorite titles. Van's vocals are equally tender on this one, with gentle harmonies building on his voice. Strings take center stage briefly at about the halfway mark of this track, ushering in a bit of piano that works through the rest of this song to really create the body. Your eighth track is entitled Once in a Lifetime Feelings. Another highlight, I would say as well, opens with arpeggiated acoustic guitar and a little bass roll. The fiddle is absolutely mean on this thing. And then the vocals take hold with an interesting and kind of like somewhat psychedelic organ element. The piano and fiddle play off each other as the song moves through a unique combination of rhythm and blues and Americana. And I really enjoyed the solo in the middle of this track with the fiddle playing off of the guitar and some intriguing time signatures coming from the drums on this one as well. The coda works with the title hook, big fiddle, organ, and also really lovely harmonies to close this thing out. This leads into your ninth song, Stomping Ground, which I would say is another one of the better songs on this record. Leads off with light acoustic guitar, simple percussion, and big strings that create the backdrop for Van's vocals to go to work. Harmonies give the track more energy, along with a shift in the string arrangement that is established. This track has this mellow country gospel energy. The drums begin to slowly develop a little after the minute mark and then really go to work nicely just before the 2-minute mark in the track. Those strings find big backbone in a solo about halfway through the song, with the saxophone taking the baton shortly after that. Van's vocals take the lead once more off a bridge into the final chorus, and then the coda is going to feature another great performance from the saxophone as well. Your 10th song is entitled Memories and Visions. Vocals are immediate on this one right out the gate, with swells of strings and soothing rhythm. His voice has sounded great through this record, but when I heard the song and when I continue to listen to it, there's something about his performance where his voice seems particularly pristine on this track. With all the strings at work, this is a song with a prominent classic pop feel, but there is an underlying country element in its foundation. The Spanish-style guitar adds a brilliant touch to the delicacy of the song. It's something that is really not very common on this record. I think this is the only time you hear that influence, so I love that. It's got this soulful retro organ that takes hold of the track around the 3-minute mark, transitioning into a dominant string section. The Spanish-style guitar takes the lead briefly right before about the 5-minute mark, and then this thing closes out and moves into your 11th track, When the Rains Came. And I love this portion of the album, but it does feel a little, I don't know, just cumbersome. But this song, I like the percussive textures that like take hold as this thing opens, along with some organ and simple guitar that play in. And that guitar becomes more predominant with Van's vocals entering. It's a soulful and gospel driven, both musically and lyrically. It embodies this shapeless quality to open, but building towards a soaring hook. I really like the way this track finds more structure. It does stay pleasantly loose though, which I think works to its advantage. The guitar takes the lead a little after the 2-minute mark, and after a solo around the 3-minute and 30-second mark, that like it almost embodies this sitar-like effect that he plays with a couple of times actually on this record. There's a shivering fiddle that becomes a key element through the 4th minute of the song, working on and off with this droning quality, and then this number drifts out with a big coda. Your 12th song is entitled Colorblind, opens urgently with electric guitar and with the vocal following soon after. There's an organ-driven rock and roll track with this mellow nature that takes hold and a mid-tempo drive. And then I just love the way the bass struts around through this number. The saxophone goes to work around the minute and 30-second mark, leading into a groovy little bridge. And then this track mellows just a bit, moving into the final verse and coda, where the hook hangs on the title once more. As I said, a very common feature of the writing on this record. And your penultimate track is also your title track. Your 13th song is entitled Remembering Now. I almost said 13, which would be very Irish and appropriate, but it opens with moody electric guitar to briefly usher in this bluesy jazz style track to match. I love the way that it works with this noir aesthetic as well. This song, it honestly, it feels like the smoky back room of a big city club at 3 a.m. And I love the mood that it has. This trickling piano plays aimlessly with purpose, though, while strings swell and this sultry backing vocal adds body to the song as well. Horns and strings come to life with this gospel flair, shining some light in a dark place, I would say. The middle of the track finds his vocals taking more of a recitative, free-form storytelling quality, leading into a call and response surge. And this is basically a big mark of the vocals through the coda to finish this track. And then your final song is entitled Stretching Out. Number 14 is going to open with these classic pop strings that swell to open, with this quiet cymbal count off, leading us into a track that is sultry jazz and pop. The bass walks slowly behind sharp staccato strings that work in stark contrast, I would say. And they providing this kind of like droning shuffle throughout the track, which is a big one. There's other staccato strings that provide an icy shimmer that creates great texture against the piano. And then this arrangement, it does level out around the 2-minute and 30-second mark in what feels like a brief chorus before reverting to its opening feel. And there's just this really nice fluid movement on this thing from start to finish. And again, a big, almost 9-minute track that embodies this nice jam territory. I would say that even with the longer runtime of some of these tracks, this is one that I love the exploration. And I love the way that it caps off what is overall a really solid experience. I would say, again, the one thing that hinders this album is that maybe it is too long, it is too much. And with Van Morrison's prolific nature, I would say if you have this many songs that you feel deserve the presence on a record, just put out more albums. I would say be more discerning about what you're doing concept-wise, because that is something that he has done well in the last 2 decades, putting out records that focus solely on jazz, solely on country, solely on rock and roll, solely on blues. I mean, he's never been afraid to, I guess, put his eclectic nature aside and just really focus a project on one of the particular influences that has driven his style throughout the decades. But I would say that the majority of these songs are beautiful, they're gorgeous. You know, if this thing was shorter and more concise, I'd probably rate it a little better, but I would say with the arduous runtime, I'm going to give this thing a 7.6 out of 10. It's really solid, but the way that he keeps pumping out music, hopefully that doesn't stop. And I would love to see him maybe go back to that classic album format. Give us just a really tight listening experience that falls into that 45-minute zone, and then just keeps the listener captivated and enthralled from start to finish without these moments of feeling like, you know, maybe it's time to take a break. And, you know, with the double record on wax, I do love the ability to maybe just listen to the A side and the B side, and then the C side and D side. I will say that the album does, in the halves that it presents, find great qualities in those two components. So if it ends up being too much for you, which I think oftentimes most of us don't have 70 minutes to just sit down, but I think it's a fun way to experience this record. Enjoy one disc, enjoy the other, go back and forth, have a ball with this thing. But I hope that you enjoy this record. I hope you find this review helpful as well. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.